Hello everyone, and greetings from Singapore. I'm Gareth Wong, and I'm the CEO of Midvana, a real assets fund management company incorporated by Mitsubishi Corporation from Japan and Sabana Jurong from Singapore. I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon, and a very big thank you also to the ULI Asia Pacific for giving me this opportunity to moderate a fireside chat with three next generation leaders in the urban, built environment, and mobility space, of whom I'm also privileged to call as friends. So let's start off with the first round of introductions. Very briefly, I have Michael Wijaya, Group CEO of Cinemas Land, one of the largest, most diversified and reputable developers in Indonesia. I have Kishin, RK, CEO of RB Capital, a well-known name in Singapore that has done several iconic rejuvenation and redevelopment projects. And last but not least, I have Arthur Chua, CEO of GoBell Group, one of Singapore's oldest and leading names in commercial vehicle leasing, and now at the forefront of innovation in the mobility space. So let's start off with a very quick snapshot of what has happened over the last 2 years for everyone. COVID has had a big impact on the way we live, work, and play. And I would like to start the first question with you, Kishin. Right? When we look back at your iconic quayside development, which completed in 2017, right? Maybe your thoughts on how developments in mixed-use projects will look like in the next chapter. And perhaps if you could look back in time, knowing now what has transpired over the last 2 years, would you have changed anything in the design, in the thought process, or even the outcome that you envisioned?
Oh, thanks, Gareth, for the question. Good to be here, so thank you for having me on this platform today. The first thing I'd say to your question, Gareth, is that the one thing that we did not realize when we built Robertson Quay was that it was going to be used as a workspace. We were building an entertainment hub with restaurants, with bars, with membership clubs, and residences. The last thing that we expected when we built Robertson Quay was the fact that the CBD was going to be shut down for 2 years, and people were going to be working from home. So I think the few things that kind of looking back, I would have done a little bit differently if I knew that more than 75% of the time of the residents are going to be spent working in their own neighborhood. I think we would have integrated a lot of the services and programmed Robertson Quay a little bit differently to cater to maybe a workspace during the day, and allowing the alfresco restaurants and the cafes and the bars to act as a hybrid model, workspace during the day and entertainment and dining in the evening.
So multi-purpose, multi-function, vibrancy throughout the day, that kind of concept, right?
Yeah, I think that's sort of just a very short way of doing it, but everything from improving the Wi-Fi to bicycle stands to lockers to just having a very different identity to what we would look at today as a restaurant at Robertson Quay.
Maybe I'll ask Mike a little bit about your thought process. BSD City, which is your flagship town in Greater Jakarta, has been held out as an icon for new age development, and there has been a lot of activity over the last decade. So the drive to move to a digitalization sort of path for a township was probably pioneered by yourself, right? When you came back, and over the last decade, what was your motivation, and how do you see that continuing to remain relevant, or how will that change, or how has that changed in the last 2 years? Your impression of what you would do in the next chapter for BSD City.
Right. I think the world digitalization of the trend of the world is in every aspect of our life. It's different from the 2000 .com bubble. In this aspect, it's touched every part of our lives, like health and even fitness and all that. So the users of digitalization is of a certain age group that we can garner and we can gather together at a certain development is beneficial for me as a developer, because we are targeting this age group where the spending power is high and and they're young. So this trend of following this digitalization trend will continue, and it's just how real estate developers like us or city developers like us follow through and execute and you know, attract these customers well, right? And it's about knowing how they live, and it's about adjusting our strategies to what the new generation wants, right? So it's always going to continue, and I believe this trend is here to stay for the long run.
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting time for Indonesia. Right? I want to come back to you on some of that later on.
Sure,
right? Lastly, Arthur, on your thoughts, you know, I wanted to pick your brain a bit because mobility is changing so much, whether it's shared mobility, electrification of our vehicles. You know. And I think the pattern in which transportation is going to evolve will have a material impact. It already has, right, on our urban landscape. So from your perspective, and I know you've spoken about polycentric town planning, right? What do you think is the future for transport as a whole and our built environment?
I think transport will change a lot post-COVID for a few reasons. Firstly, the way people work will be very different. So post-COVID, we expect more people to work from home, at least certain times of the day or certain days of the week. So that's the first thing. Second thing, flexible working hours. So people will be less measured on how much time they spend at the physical office, but more measured based on KPIs and deliverables. As a result of these two new patterns, I do think that commute to work will change drastically. It will be less peak and troughs. It won't be like big shifts of movements of people during the peak hours of the day. And again, because of flexible working hours, I think people will be traveling throughout the day, right? And this whole polycentric town planning concept actually talks about work, live, play within a vicinity or township. This could not have actually materialized without COVID. COVID actually accelerated this trend, mainly because now people do not have to be at the physical office to work. So just imagine that flexible working hours, people traveling throughout the day, trips will be shorter distance, higher frequency within this township, and we have to actually relook at our existing public transport infrastructure, which is catered for today's commute patterns of massive movements of people during certain periods of the day.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk also about some of the pet projects that you guys have done over the last 1.5 years or so. I've seen you guys have still been very active and busy. So I'll start off again with Arthur
Yes.
now. Back to you on your recent acquisition of Blue SG.
Yes.
Right? How does that fit in with your broader plans and your business model? And perhaps you could also share with us a bit about the other innovations you're working on, like swap mobility,
Okay.
in a nutshell. If you could.
Okay, so Blue SG first, right? Blue SG, electric car sharing company. I was very motivated to acquire that company, mainly because I believed in a culture of people moving from ego to eco. So pure electric, loved it.
Right.
Second reason I acquired the company was because the company had 3 years worth of data of people moving. And car sharing business is a very typical machine learning kind of business model. You have to test hypotheses, keep changing the demand patterns, and actually see what happens. So I paid a premium for the company because of that data, 3 years worth of data that they have, which I believe I can augment the business based on using machine learning and AI, right? Creating new technologies related to fleet rebalancing, dynamic pricing, and the likes. So this is a Blue SG. Other ventures that I did, one of it, Swap Mobility, you mentioned, it solves an academic problem called the pickup delivery with time window problem. So what this problem actually measures is how do you move the most number of things with the least number of vehicles in the shortest time and distance possible. Research since the 1980s, we are currently ranked globally #1, licensing the technology in 7 countries to governments, to large corporates, to do people movement, and actually we're translating that to logistics movement. So these are a few mobility ventures that I've done. Autonomous forklifts, AI stack, and others of the likes.
Right.
Thank you.
I'll come back to you again, right, to pick your ideas on how that will shape our future living environment. I think that has a profound impact, right, on the future of how we live, we move around, and we move our goods, right? Maybe back to you, Kishan, on Tiffin Labs, right? I know you're very passionate about F&B. It's a key component in a lot of your mixed developments, and you know, I think we'd like to hear a little bit about your thoughts, right, on cloud kitchens, where you see that big momentum going forward. I think you have more than 160, right, cloud kitchens now in Singapore, and it's only growing, right? Where do you see that trend growing, and does that mean it's going to be a new model of F&B in the future? Is it still relevant to have your Michelin star restaurants scattered around, or are you trying to pull a Michelin star cloud kitchen?
Oh, no. I think the Michelin star ecosystem will definitely continue. It's not the space that we're after. I think the one thing I would say to Tiffin Labs, and the reason why we started Tiffin Labs is primarily because earlier on, in the early days of the pandemic, we saw that over 60% of restaurants were shutting down globally. And that is because dine-in was dead. So what we decided to do at Tiffin Labs was to really sort of create alternative sources of revenue focused on the massive growth in food delivery globally. So what did we do? We created digital restaurant brands, and we empowered small businesses with underutilized kitchens to capitalize on their existing labor, kitchen equipment, rental, and physical spaces to tap onto that demand coming from food delivery. So using our supply chain and tech, plugging them into the small and medium businesses across Southeast Asia, we allowed them to tap on basically brands which we owned, partnered with these merchants to just focus on sort of food delivery, right? To enable them to be ready for that food delivery uptick that we saw across the world. So today we're in Singapore, Malaysia, and the US actually. So we're opening in Thailand next month. So those are the markets that I feel are just the start. But between Southeast Asia and US is something that we're seeing a lot of growth, and that's where we are playing.
Great. I think that's defining a new era of utilization of spare kitchens, exactly as you said. I think the trend is still going to continue, right? Maybe, Mike, a bit of your thoughts, again on BSD City and the digital hub. Again, congratulations on bringing Traveloka into BSD City, and a lot more tech names that are there, right? You have Grab, you have Huawei, you have a whole gamut of different tech companies that are moving, right? And as we see the issues arising from COVID over the last 1.5 years, lockdown scenarios, for example, right? How do you see that trend moving forward of promoting people moving out from the central Jakarta area, right? And how do you empower people in their new lifestyles?
So just to give you a background, BSD City is 6,000 hectares. It's 30 kilometers away from central Jakarta. We have the headquarters of Unilever and Traveloka. Their objectives were driven 3 years ago. Was driven to become a more green initiative. Is the green initiative to become more green friendly, right? Unilever. And I think over this COVID, people are starting to realize that space is an asset, right? I think having enough space, having fresh air is an asset, and density, people in density in CBD areas, it will take a change of events. So I think as more people are more health cautious and more cautious about their mental being, office spaces outside of dense area will be of a choice, and the trend will continue. Similar to the trend in Silicon Valley, where everything is more horizontal instead of vertical. So I think that trend of office demand will continue, and making a CBD in this 6,000 hectares in BSD is very important for the growth of the BSD city.
Right. You touched on the point about having more space and greening of the landscape, and it's also, I think, in a nutshell, it's the general awareness of wellness, right? So maybe Kishan, can you share a bit of your thoughts? I know that's something that's close to your heart, right? Now on wellness in general, for the future of real estate, right? How big of that component can we see in your future developments, and what different form will that take now?
Yeah, so I think, firstly I would say that the lines are blurred with regards to what we define typically as retail, offices, homes. People are working where they live and where they sleep, and people are shopping in their toilets. So it's a very different world we live in today, right? So with the lines being blurred, I think the one thing that comes into mind is the mental health, right? People are not interacting as much as they used to in the past, right? Gone are the days of the magic of the pantry, as we call it in the workspace. So, being focused on wellness, mental health is something that we are integrating into a lot of our developments. So today, for example, in the hospitality business that we have in Singapore, across Intercontinental Holiday Inn and Holiday Inn Express, we're developing a wellness concierge, for example, right? People are conscious of what they put into their bodies today. They want to know, right, the ingredients, what's written at the back. So they want to have, meditation, online meditation. They want to have, sunrise yogas. And that all is starting to become important if you were to sign up a corporate account in a hotel today, for example, right? So the future demand of space, of who stays with you, is very much integrated into what wellness offering do you have as a developer. So that's sort of the push from our side to look into it. But also personally, I do believe in sort of knowing what I put in my body. So I think it's also a very personal thing for me.
On the topic of wellness and safety, right, I think apart from public transport safety, as we are generally aware of, is now safety of traveling, right, fears of virus transmission, etc. But it's still a big topic, right? It's how to convince people to get back into the utilization of that public transport, right? What do you think, Arthur? How can your products or your thoughts evolve and shape how we can convince people to be comfortable with public transport?
So the first company that I started, Venture Build, SWAT Mobility, that I talked about just now, one of our key markets is in Philippines. We move people efficiently, right? So effectively what we do when I say pick up delivery time windows, we pull as much people on a vehicle, which is larger capacity vehicle like a bus, and get them to where they want to go in the shortest time and distance possible. So initially when we started the business, in Philippines, it shot up very well. Many people were wanting to use us because we could get people from home to work, sometimes faster and cheaper than public transport, right, as a private transport operator. Subsequently, the market shut down due to COVID. But companies very soon realized that they still have to get their employees to work. People can't be working home all the time. So what actually happened is they requested us to provide a kind of safe transport that does tracing and also breaking down people from the company to teams to move people from their homes all the way to work in an efficient manner. So this is the main trend that we see clients adopting our technology in Thailand, especially in Thailand, dominated by manufacturing plants. People still have to go to work. They don't take public transport. They choose to use our private bus operators that operate on our technology.
Right. Yeah. I think, Mike, that's also related to some of the your projects that you have in Indonesia, right? Because it's across many different locations, right? So if you see transport in general, right, congestion has always been a problem in Jakarta. I think the completion of the MRT 2-3 years ago, we started to see a lot of shift for people. Actually, it was quite well received, right? Because especially people living in the central CBD area. Do you think that it will take a lot more to convince people to go back, or have you noticed that, in general, the shift back to public transport is still there? Because that's going to be a core, I would say, solution, right, to the congestion issues in Indonesia.
So post-COVID, I think Indonesia is Indonesians are very resilient people, and I believe that the economy is going to be as resilient as the Indonesian people are. I think they are going to go headstrong into these public transportation, obviously with masks and with their own cautious, but I don't think it will be too much of a factor in Indonesia, especially this MRT stations are definitely an upgrade to what they're taking, like Metro Mini, those small buses. So it's definitely an upgrade, and I think when this lockdown ends in Indonesia, in Jakarta, malls and such will be crowded, and hence public transportation will lead to that addition.
At this juncture, maybe I'd like to shift the nature of the conversation a little bit, right? Let's talk a bit about your outlook, right, on the next chapter I think we like to call ourselves still part of the millennial generation, right? Although we are probably at the tail end of that. Right? But it's a transitional phase. I was chatting with Arthur previously that, the technology that we've been exposed to in the younger years, right? We saw a lot of evolution from dot matrix, right? Very basic computers, right? And then we evolved into the first generation of handphones, right? And today you fast forward, that is information at your fingertips, right? It's transformed the way we've learned, we live, we operate it, and basically, even ordering food and groceries and, everything at the touch of our fingertips, right? So what do you think are the challenges in the next chapter, right, as we move into that? And from a personal standpoint, what is, motivating you in your business, in your life? Perhaps you can share anything that comes to mind. Right? Maybe we'll start. Kishan?
Motivating me? Well, I guess, look, with regards to what we do for a living, which is, real estate development, the big elephant in the room and the question we've always been asked is, are your buildings going to be relevant in the future? Would there be the use and need for buildings in the future, right? With the rise of e-commerce, etc., what is the use of the malls that we basically built? What is the use of the malls in the future, right? So for us, I think for me, it's personally the one thing that keeps me up at night and also keeps me extremely excited about life also is the fact that when I see your Orchard Roads and your Fifth Avenues and some of the most expensive real estate in the world traditionally not being as relevant as they used to be anymore, right? And what do we need to do to make that relevant again? I think, so that's sort of the one thing that excites me a little bit because I see that as an opportunity. Integrating experiences, integrating and sort of creating that whole showcase effect rather than needing to buy from the stores. How do you integrate e-commerce and physical real estate, right? So those are some of the questions I ask myself. And some of the beliefs that I have is that over the next 36 to 48 months, we've got a lot of clever people around, city planners and technology companies, that's going to use this, what I call underutilized real estate that was relevant in the 80s and 90s. They were going to use it, they're going to find a use case to use it in a different manner. And when that happens, I see that being the next wave of retail. Right, and that to me is the most exciting. Yeah.
Arthur, what do you think?
Yeah, many thoughts to your question, but following on what Kishan mentioned, I do think that retail patterns definitely will change. In fact, what I do envision in a town in future, example polycentric town that I just mentioned, other than changes in commute patterns, I think the town will be working or living 24 hours. Imagine flexible working hours. People are working throughout the day as and when they want to work, right? So whenever they demand a transport or demand food, it will be lasting throughout the day. So when there's such patterns of a 24-hour town, I do think automation and robotics are extremely important. So one of my venture builds, it's an what I call AI stack company. We don't actually build, example, the manual forklifts. We build AI stack to convert manual equipment or manual forklifts autonomous. This company we have sold to fairly large clients like Cartuanetsi, GlaxoSmithKline, as well as working with an international OEM to license our product, autonomous AI stack, to sell in Asia Pacific, right? So autonomous is definitely something I'm going very much into, less so on urban roads, but more in enclosed environments to facilitate automation that's required for a 24-hour city. So that's one thing. But I think the biggest thing I wanted to share, what I noticed in Asia, is a scarcity of technology talents. This is the greatest problem we have, I feel, mainly because our education system, our curriculums were not built to teach data science, AI, and robotics until very recently. Unlike in the West, they are big into quantum physics, robotics, battle simulations, space shuttle. We don't have that in Asia, with the exception of China. So China is very unique because of the sheer population they have so much applications to test AI. But outside China, this is the problem in Asia. So I think the biggest hurdle for us to grow as an economy in Asia is this scarcity of talents. And the best way to actually solve this problem is to bridge the best AI minds in certain selected deep tech countries of the world into the startups of Asia. So one of the latest ventures I'm starting, my second fund, called Cube3 Ventures, the main thesis is to set up technology talent hubs in selected deep tech countries, house the best AI scientists and data talents, and license or actually make these talents as a service to the startups of the portfolio companies they have invested in, leapfrog their capabilities, fortify their position in Asia, and grow market share.
Thanks, Arthur. I think some of what Arthur mentioned, or it might resonates with you in your development of talent and education. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as a city planner and developer, hearing experts in Kishin about retail, about on and offline, about how these things affect the F&B, and hearing a lot about Arthur about two things, about talent development, and also about mobility. These are things as a master planner that I will have to think and consider, and how to integrate them, right? We have to integrate them into the planning, into the building, because only then this city will be sustainable, only then this city will speak to the generation of the future. So I think that's my job in general, to listen to these experts. At the main forefront of city building, town blending, all university towns are built from talent, from universities. Berkeley, or Boston, or Harvard, or all these cities, grew out from tech talent or education. So I believe that this is an old technique in the book of real estate or city building. Gather yourself with talent so that it's like having sugar and the ants will come, meaning that the talent are the sugar, right? So in this case, in this new age, talent is what Arthur has said, the deep tech, the scientists, the data scientists, and all that. So those are the kind of institution as real estate developers that I have to continue to develop in order to create a good foundation for the sustainability of the city, of BSC City.
Right. Thanks for sharing, Mike. So I think let's talk a bit about personal passions. Right? I know, Mike, you're big into basketball, right? Avid fan, right?
Yes.
I think perhaps from the extrapolation, apart from that as a sport, how do you think basketball has given you some new insights perhaps on business and partnerships?
Yes. I think I take basketball very seriously. I study the game very deeply, and there's a lot of things that the coaches in the days taught me in basketball that I still find relevant in life or in creating in the organization. I think the most important is teamwork, right? I think I started. I joined Sinamasland 14 years ago. I was 24 years old. I didn't know a goddamn thing about organization. So basketball really taught me a lot about how to manage a team, like how to manage an organization, and I suppose that has been my forte. Managing organization from old organization to a new. Collaboration, teamwork, I think those things are a lot of things that I learned in basketball that I still use in leading this organization. Yes.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for sharing. Arthur, I know you run a lot, right? You
Yes.
go for your daily runs every day, and also you started some projects on painting, mini art, and could you share a little bit about that, if you don't mind, and like, what do you think is the context for keeping ourselves in check, or just having a personal sense of stability, right, during this pandemic?
Yes, thanks for asking, Gareth. So I started drawing around, I would say 6 months ago. It started because my father-in-law passed on. My wife's from China, so she couldn't visit her dad when he passed on. And I wanted to cheer her up every day. So I started with one post-it. I wrote Happy Saturday, posted it on the mirror, and it lightened her day, right? Second day, I wrote Lazy Sunday. Again, just a word. And then she was happy. So I started drawing pictures of firstly, very ugly pictures at the start. Wasn't very good at drawing. But into the 7th day, I realized my wife was very happy every day looking at the pictures. So I started drawing cartoons, and I got better and better. And then each post-it from 5 minutes took me half an hour, and now it takes me 2 hours per post-it. And one day I bragged to my wife, I said, I'll draw it 365 days for you. And she was very happy. I said, to make sure that you're happy every day for the next 1 year. So I've been drawing for 180 days now. And one thing I did realize that's very important was it keeps me constantly reminded of how important a family is to you. Every time I draw, I'm constantly aware of what's important in life. Be nice to my wife. So she'll be nice to me. And it also keeps me off stress. So that drawing actually relieves me of a lot of stress.
Thanks
so
for sharing.
I'm a big fan of drawing now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Arthur.
Thank you.
I think you're a phenomenal artist now, mini art. One day we should get you to...
NFT.
Yeah, you can put it on an NFT, exactly. But I think this is a general topic, right, that COVID has rebalanced a lot of our lives, right? Recentered what's important and given us a new perspective, right? I think we can all agree that prior to this, we were all busy jetting off, you know, or always focused on trying to grab the next deal. And it's important at this juncture, but maybe less important, right? So I think, but it's also especially trying for younger kids. For our families, you know, we can see that it's evolving, right? It's good on one hand, on the other hand, that's also given new challenges, right? So it's really brought into central theme, or the central stage, the topic of wellness, right, which I think, Kishan, you were mentioning earlier. And that's quite critical, right? So I think moving on from that trajectory, I wanted to ask you guys something more personal, right? So now as we are not on Zooms or attending meetings or you're trying to think of our next business plan, in your private time, right, perhaps you could share with us something that you're watching, whether it's on Netflix or on Disney Plus or any other platform, right, and what's keeping you interested, right? Kishan, would you like to start?
Thanks, Gareth. So for me, I stumbled upon a show called Stitzel, which is an Orthodox Jewish show. And that sort of captivated me. And so now I just finished it, but you know, it was interesting just to understand the way the traditional Orthodox Jews think, and you know, sort of their beliefs in terms of the way they do business, love. So it's pretty interesting because it lends a very different perspective to sort of what we're used to in Singapore. And just understanding that was quite interesting for me. And so immediately after that, I went to my next Jewish show called Unorthodox, which is, you know, about a female who had to run away from home because she did not want to practice the Orthodox ways of the Jewish beliefs. So, you know, those two shows I stumbled on, and I must recommend that to everyone who's here today, because I think it's pretty interesting. Of course, the billions and the rest of it, of course, is very interesting, and I'm still on it. But these two Jewish shows are pretty highly recommended from my end, I guess I would say.
Mike, yourself? Anything interesting?
Yeah, well, you can't get away from Squid Games nowadays, so I think that's what I just finished, and I think it's great. It's a great way to introduce Asia to the world.
Yeah, also very, very deep topics on, you know, the balance of life, stratospheres. You know, I was reading articles about how the Korean society, a lot of them say that that's emblematic, right, of their positions, but yet there's no Squid Game for them to get out of, right? So I think it's also brought into sharper focus on that the inequality that has happened, right? I think that COVID has brought into play, right? Again, something that we have to think about. Right? Arthur, yourself, anything interesting on your playlist? Yeah.
I watch a lot of cartoons. So now I'm back to Futurama. I'm not sure if you guys remember Futurama. It's the same guy that created The Simpsons, right? Matt Groening, I think. And I like to watch comedies before I sleep. I have to watch the show before I sleep. If not, I can't sleep typically. So I just turn on the TV, watch, and then I'll fall asleep. But watching light-hearted things makes me sleep better, actually. So Futurama, what's interesting is even with Japanese manga that I'm watching, or with Futurama, it's amazing that this cartoonist or this artist that draw the manga have thought of artificial intelligence 20, 30 years ago. So I find the thought process of watching futuristic cartoons very interesting. And even in Futurama, you can see at the start of every episode, people are traveling in hyperloops, which is being taught today, right, by Elon Musk. So and Dr. Zoidberg, I'm not sure if you know him. He's the lobster in Futurama. He says the silliest thing, so I like to watch it a lot.
Thanks for sharing, guys. Why I wanted to ask this question is that because I think that is the new real estate, right? Real estate, whether it's on your screen, on your phone, and it clearly breaks the lines of just traditional, right? And online to offline, as we all know it, I think that's a big central theme, right? And how we weave that in. And as you know, in our generation, we also trying to watch more things, right? Trying to catch up with all the new content that's coming in. But that's really defining the future generations, right? I believe my kids, your kids will be they're just very natural plugged in, right? We used to talk about how when the first iPad and iPhones came on, it was very instinctive for young kids to know how to swipe left and right. And now there's no need for that, right? It's all by facial recognition and who knows what's the next chapter, right? So, but I think there's also one topic that I wanted to ask you guys about, which is that it's very easy to click undo or to reset from a digital space. From a real estate point of view, from a transport point of view, it's very difficult to say, let's undo things, right? That is also the challenge that we face, right? Whether we build buildings or we build road networks, right? It's long-term future, trying to catch what's the next wave, but yet it takes a huge momentum. It takes a tipping point for things to happen, right? So if there was one thing that perhaps we could galvanize together and start a project, right? What do you think would be key on your mind, right? If we could get a blank slate to start with, right? What do you think would be a key thing that we should think about for not just ourselves, but for future generations? Right? It's a broad question, right? I think I just want to keep it open. But if there's something that we could do to define real estate of the future, what would that be? And maybe something that we've already spoken about, but we could take it a little bit further. Maybe I'll start with Kishan. Yeah.
Great question, Gareth. I think my response to that question would be education. Because I truly believe that disruption is taking place at a much quicker pace today. Innovation is happening at levels where we have never seen in the past before, which also leads to the point of irrelevance. Right? So today, in our 30s, and when we look at the Gen Z, we do feel irrelevant because what they know how to do, the way they perform, the way they behave, their interests, is something that is a huge disconnect for myself, I would say. And so, number one, I think learning would be key to maintain your relevance as disruption and innovation keeps disrupting the spaces that we basically know or just life in general, right? So I think my next project, if I were to have the opportunity to do, would be really sort of creating an education platform which would be interactive for different generations to opt for what do they want to learn to make them personally feel relevant again. Right? What are the gaps that they feel they need to fill, basically? So that would be my very quick response to a very deep and complicated question that you posed.
I think my response to that is that apart from learning, what is really becoming more apparent to me now is that we need to unlearn and then relearn. I think that's especially challenging today, right? There's a whole gamut of information that we need to process and digest. We're just talking about how much you need to read and what makes sense, right? From that point of view. Right. Thanks for sharing, Kishan. Mike, any thoughts? It can be on any parallel, any dimension.
Yeah, very, very, very deep question. But I think I agree with you both. I think innovation is only done through if you want to learn, if you want to do something better. So, you can't undo, but you only can improve from what is the present. So I think just understanding what the future is and trying to keep up with it, I think that's the most important thing to do, yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Arthur, any thoughts on?
Before I answer your question, just wanted to touch on what Kishan mentioned. There's this new philosophy about a 100-year-old life. In the past, we learn, and then we go to school, and then we go to work, and then we retire and enjoy life, right? and we stop learning. So the philosophy today is you actually enjoy life, you work and you learn throughout your 100 years. This is how the world has changed. We can't stop learning, right? So that's a new philosophy I've been reading about. But to undo things, what I wanted to share is first about relating this to a software perspective. So there's a new trend today that talks about composable architecture. You know, last time when you buy systems, you buy the whole ERP system, lock, stock, and barrel. But it's not composable. It means you cannot break it down into smaller building blocks to decide what are the functions you want to use, right? So architecture for software should be written today. Gartner really recommends this also. To be composable in nature means you only choose granular functions that you want. You call for the API, and you only choose those functions that are relevant to you, let's say in a smart city or a development, right? So why I wanted to bring this topic up is because I do believe that in future, because the world is changing so fast, we need to keep testing hypotheses and then try, test and try, test and try, right? You just have to keep reiterating this process, right? Testing hypothesis, launching it, test and launch it. So if you really think about this as the way to go forward, then everything that you do has to be in smaller building blocks such that when something doesn't work out, you can change that building block to replace it with something, rather than building something that can't be untuned, like you mentioned. And I think this really determines whether a country, a city, or a development is built to bend or built to break. So what I'm trying to advocate is building to bend by using this mini building blocks. I like to use this word that my friend always tells me: shoot lots of rifles first, then fire the cannon. So test hypothesis, shoot, and then fire the cannon. If the cannon doesn't work, and then you redo your building blocks again. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great sharing. Thanks, Arthur. I think that's also like, one of the things in transport that I think about is the tipping point, let's say from horse carriages and cobblestone streets to then vehicles, right? As we look at electrification and shared mobility in the future, I think that's going to be a very defining moment for us to look at how we plan transport networks, which will have material impact on our real estate, and the way our kids and future generation live and grow up, right? So a lot of good points. Thanks for sharing, guys. I think along that same line and thought, one of the things that perhaps maybe we can share with our audiences is, in your next travel, right? We've been grounded for a while, right? And as you want to learn new things, I think that global exposure is important, right? You can only get so much experience learning from the internet, right? But as we look towards travel resuming, what's on your next travel itinerary? Where do you want to go, and why, right? Maybe Kishan, I know you're coming.
So, Gareth, we all live in Singapore now. The only global exposure we can get quarantine-free is Germany. So that would be my next travel. I think I don't think I want to quarantine for in a hotel for a long time. So I think that my next travel would be either Germany and back. I think that would be a good break after 18 months of being in Singapore. But I think I must say I enjoyed my time in Singapore. It's been fun. I wouldn't complain. But if I had to travel next, it would be Germany, and I think to a place with a change of weather would be my priority, right, for myself.
Mike, yourself, where would you like to go?
Anywhere, actually, right? Honestly, I think that's the honest thing for everyone. But I would like to go home. I would like to go back to Indonesia. There's a lot of home affairs I have to do. There's a lot of things I have to follow up. So that's probably where I want to go. I want to go home. Yeah.
What about you, Arthur?
Egypt.
Egypt.
If my wife allows. I've never been to Egypt. I always wanted to climb the pyramids.
Very nice.
Or see the pyramids. If my wife allows, right? She doesn't like to walk too long. She says that her back aches if she walks too long. But somehow when you go shopping in Japan, she can walk the whole day. So.
Yeah, I think that's a common statement, right, for most of our wives, I think. I think as we prepare to sort of wrap up this conversation, I think we've covered quite a lot from the future of real estate, the future of transport, some of the more personal anecdotes, right? I think it's been a very good time for us to come together. Thank you again for your time. Perhaps as we round up, I wanted to get your last thoughts, right, on, I think it's a period of reflection because of COVID and the whole pandemic. As we look back, maybe if there was one thing you could tell the younger you, right, in fact it's also relevant to our kids, right? When you look back at the sort of exposure that you had from your parents, right, what is the one thing that you would tell yourself, right? I think there's a very interesting video that I saw. Some celebrities did that. They already did a pre-recording, right, of a younger version of them. And when they look back, and then they were like, oh, maybe we should embark on something like that, and maybe in 5-10 years time we come back, right? But we'll perhaps look back at this video and be wondering like, what are we doing, right? Or our thoughts, right? So, but now knowing what you know, and you look back, what is one thing you would tell yourself? Let's say 10 years ago, when we were, or 10, 15 years ago, when we were in our mid-20s, right? Arthur, you want to start?
I would say to stay resilient and be elastic to be able to adapt to changes. That's what I would tell my kid and the people in my company.
Okay, thanks, Arthur. Kishan?
I think the one thing that I kind of, as pre-pandemic, the one thing that pandemic taught me is that change is a constant, right? And for me, prior to the pandemic, I must admit that I was not somebody, I was a creature of habit. I enjoyed consistency. I enjoyed stability. And I took that for granted. So I think the one thing I would tell myself if I was 10 years younger is you got to be ready for change. You got to be ready for instability, and you need to basically bend yourself when necessary and not break yourself, right, when change comes. So I think being a bit more flexible and being a little bit more resilient, both mentally and from an expectations point of view. So enjoying being here in Singapore is an example of, for the last 18 to 24 months, is one example of being mentally resilient, right? But I think that's one lesson that I would take very seriously for myself.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Mike?
For me, I think pre-COVID, I think you can always say that the schedule was always packed to 1 month ahead, 2 months ahead, and hence family time wasn't there. So I think looking back, and what I say to my kids is that scheduling family time and being there, not just being there in an empty state of mind, is very important. I think that's what has taught me in this COVID period, is that even family time, I believe needs to be scheduled. Means if you're scheduled, you're there, you're locked in, and you're locked in to be a dad, you're locked in to be a father figure or whatever. I think that's very important. That's what COVID has taught me.
Yeah, great, thanks. I think personally, this has made me reflect a lot on life as well, as you guys have said, and also as we have an opportunity to impact the way we live and we operate. I think it's more introspection, right? We think a lot of it very deliberately now for the future health and wellness, right, of everyone in general. So one final question for everyone, which is, what's next? What's on your plate? What's on your agenda for yourself, your companies, right, in the next chapter? Arthur, you want to go first?
I talked about Cube Ventures that I'm starting, this technology talent hub. But I think what's more important, as you asked me this question, I'm reflecting now, is I would like to enable my wife's dream to come true. I would focus on trying to create an environment for her to realize her dreams. So that's, I think, one of the biggest projects I'll be working on next. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Arthur. Mike, what's next?
What's next? I think just there's so many things that's to do next. I think you know, a big thing that I'd like to do is definitely contribute back to the country. I think building and nurturing talent, it will go both ways. It will do well for my work, for my BSc city, and it'll do well for the country. So maybe that is something that's going to be close to my heart, is nurturing Indonesian to be relevant to the current job scope now. I think that's going to be one of my goals. Thanks. Yes.
And lastly, Christian?
So I've been thinking about this quite a bit, actually. We're reaching a point in the pandemic where things are starting to open up. I truly believe that things are going to open up very differently from the way things were before they shut. For me, what's next is to understand exactly how that opening up, how the new normal is going to behave, perform, and how is it going to impact what the businesses that I basically own and lead. So really taking time now and for the next 6 months to understand the new normal, understand the intricacies of how, what's going to be in demand, what's going to be irrelevant, and how are things going to change. I truly believe that today we sit here and that change is very different from a country to country basis. Culture has a big part to play. Policy making has a big part to play in terms of how the country behaves, how the community behaves. So I think that for myself, really understanding what that strategy is going to be in the medium term would require me to understand exactly how things are going to change, and not only from a Singapore basis, but on a global basis, because the world is very interconnected today, and people are learning from each other, right? How we handle the crisis is an example of how each government was learning from the other. So how we open up is going to be quite similar, I feel.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. I think thank you for joining me on this fireside chat, for sharing your personal anecdotes, your experience. I hope it's been fun for you guys. And for the viewers, thank you very much. It's been our pleasure to be on this fireside chat today. And for those outside of Singapore, stay well. Those in Singapore too. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.